Welcome to Breakdown. It's Monday, April 29th, 2024. JJ, over the weekend, 257 men became very happy. What happened?
Well, the NFL draft happened over the weekend, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday.
NFL, the 257 were picked.
In Detroit, Michigan.
Detroit.
Yeah.
All right.
What up, though?
Motown, JJ. SEC and Big Ten represented pretty well.
Especially if you're accounting for the future Big Ten members of the Pac-12.
Indeed.
It wasn't just that. The offensive side of the football accounted pretty well for themselves, at least quarterbacks, receivers, and tackles.
Okay, as I said earlier, there were 257 people drafted. What conference won the draft?
Well, for I think like the 15th year in a row or the 13th out of 15 years, something like that, the SEC had the most draft picks.
SEC had 59 players picked. That's 23% of all the players picked were from SEC school. Who was second?
Second was the, I guess, now defunct Pac-12 conference.
That's a bummer.
Yeah.
For them it is. It's probably good news for the SEC and the Big Ten. They were second with 43 players drafted, 16.7%, almost 17%.
Yeah, they'll be joining the Big 12 and the Big 10, a lot of those schools.
Very true. How did the Big Ten do in the draft?
They were right behind the Pac-12. They had one less player drafted than the Pac-12. They had 42.
42. Not bad. Not bad at all. The Power 5, JJ, if we take the Power 5, and add Notre Dame to the Power 5, they had 223 of the 257 players drafted. What you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is indicative of like what the transfer portal can do, and I think money talks, and I think you'll see more and more of that in the future. What do you think?
Well, money talks. This is America. Money rules. What school won the NBA draft?
The NFL draft, was won by the Michigan Wolverines, but by not quite the margin that their head coach predicted.
He predicted how many?
He predicted as many as 20. They would have needed 16 to break the record, and yet they only had 13.
Okay, the record is held by Georgia with 15. So the Wolverines led the way, though, with 13 picks in the draft.
Most in school history, but still less than 2004 Ohio State, which had 14.
Okay. Now, Michigan had how many invited to the combine?
They had 18 people invited to the combine.
And 13 got drafted. Does that surprise you?
No, I think that they had about 18 or so draftable players. I'm not surprised that they had that many draft.
Are you surprised that only 13 got drafted, though?
Not super surprised. A lot of times, when it gets down to the 7th round, like players and their agents will ask teams to not draft them, so that they have the autonomy to, pick a situation that like they can see where the dust settles and pick a situation that meets whatever deficiency they might be willing to fill. So I've heard a lot of agents. If the undrafted free agent has signed with a powerful enough agent that can throw his weight around, like a lot of times teams will abide by that and actually pitch to them why they need to be there. So I'm not surprised. I mean, two of the last 10 picks were Michigan players. So I think like a lot of the players that were draftable were later round prospects.
Okay. Well, Michigan led the way with 13. Second was Texas with 11.
Both of those teams were in the college playoff.
They were. As a matter of fact, three of the top three teams were all in the college playoff.
Oh, yeah.
The only one wasn't was Washington, and Washington was tied for third. So all the teams that made the college playoff were in the top three in draft picks.
And Washington I think was tied for third, but two of the Alabama was another team that was tied for third, but also the only other team finished the regular season undefeated, and were an injured quarterback away from making the college
Talking about the
playoff.
Seminoles.
They would have made the college playoff themselves had their quarterback not got injured.
And they were tied for third as well. JJ, before we go a little bit more.
So are we? Is a lesson that we learned that NFL talent is what it takes to make the college football playoff? I'm asking.
I think the evidence is shown clearly in the draft.
Okay.
It speaks pretty loudly.
Okay. Well, I interrupted you, but anyway, what were you gonna say?
I like your question. I want you to answer that. Does it have to have NFL talent to make it to the college playoff? And the college playoff is changing tremendously this year.
Yeah, I think if you go down the list, it's not just those 5 schools that we mentioned. Oregon was next, and then Georgia and Penn State. So those were teams that went to New Year's Six games, finished 5th, 6th, 7th in the college football playoff at the end of the regular season. So I think you will see the college talent reflect that in the NFL draft. In Ohio State, they had one of the lowest draft outputs. They only had 4 people drafted. They've had at least 6 people drafted, I think, over the last 5 plus years. But they had another 6 players probably that were draftable. Had they decided to declare themselves eligible, they almost certainly would have gotten drafted. So, I think NFL talent, I do agree with that you need that to win in college
Okay, we
football.
both agree. JJ, before we talk a little bit about the schools and the players, I want to ask you what NFL team won the draft. We don't usually talk about NFL, but I'm asking that question to you tonight anyway.
Well, I think the obvious answer to me would be the Chicago Bears.
They had the 1 and a 9 pick.
Yep, they only have, I think, 4 picks in the draft or 6 picks. I think they only have 4 picks in the draft total. But when 2 of them are Caleb Williams and Rome Odunze, I would say that's a pretty special draft regardless.
I agree.
And then they took Iowa's punter in one of those picks, and Caleb Williams texted him saying, "You're not going to be punting very much." And that's probably why he went to Iowa, so he could punt a lot.
That offense, boy,
that's a whole nother story. But
that is. JJ, let's talk about some of the players.
Mm-hmm.
The first person picked, Caleb Williams. No surprise to everybody. The Bears took him. Wise move on the Bears' part?
Yeah, I think he's going to be the best player in the draft. You can't, even if someone does end up being better than him, I don't think anybody graded out better than him in college. I think you have to make the pick. It would have been like people passing on Trevor Lawrence or Andrew Luck or something.
What are the odds that he can be as good his freshman year as Stroud was his freshman year, rookie year?
I would say pretty decent. I would say the NFC North doesn't have the best secondary in the world. The Lions did make
2 corners and 1 safety they picked.
They did, yeah. So they did make efforts to improve it, but they were one of the worst secondaries in the NFL last year, and I think there's a real opportunity.
It looked like a Lion jersey you got on there.
Yeah, might as well show off the Detroit Lions.
You talk about their secondary being that bad. JJ.
Yeah. Well, there's a reason they drafted their first 2 picks were corners for a reason.
Let's talk about the first round.
Mm-hmm.
What stood out to you in the first round?
The first 10 picks.
What about them that stood out to you?
Half of them were quarterbacks. That had never happened before. The only other time 6 quarterbacks went in the first round was 1983, a certain draft that had one John Elway lead the quarterback picks and ended with Dan Marino.
2 of the best.
2 of the best.
Yeah.
And I don't know if Bo Nix and Caleb Williams will have those type of careers, but Caleb Williams went first and Bo Nix went 12th. And 6 of the first 12, 5 of the first 10 players selected were quarterbacks.
How did the SEC and Big Ten do? Now, we know that the first one, Caleb Williams, was a former Pac-12 player. So how did the SEC and Big Ten do?
Well, the second overall draft pick was the reigning Heisman Trophy winner of LSU, notoriety, transfer from Arizona State. But Jaden Daniels. Yeah,
Okay.
his father was a cornerback in the NFL, and from a young age taught him how to cornerback drills because he thought they was going to raise a cornerback. But Jaden had different ideas in mind, and he won the Heisman Trophy last year at LSU. He was the second pick, and the third pick was Drake May out of North Carolina, another quarterback.
Okay. He was the only non-Big Ten, Big Ten SEC player, if you include the teams that are coming in this summer, USC and Texas and Oklahoma and all those other teams. But JJ, with all those quarterbacks being picked, who was the third? Which no, I ain't gonna ask you that. Which one of those quarterbacks surprised you most in the first round?
Well, I think the biggest surprise pick of anybody's night would have to say that Atlanta number 8 overall took Michael Penix Jr. after giving Kirk Cousins $100 million guaranteed.
Wow. How that was a surprise. As you say, I think everybody was surprised by that. What's your take on the guy in Ann Arbor, J.J. McCarthy, going 10th to Minnesota?
Yeah, he was the 5th quarterback taken. A lot of people thought he was going to go ahead of Michael Penix Jr. just because of the age difference. He just turned 21, and Michael Penix Jr. will be 24 in a couple of weeks, I believe.
Okay.
But yeah, I think he went to a really good fit. The Vikings traded up one pick to get go from 11 to 10 and draft him. And I think they only have Sam Darnold there, so that's a job he could win his freshman year, his rookie year.
Okay.
And they have the rookie from Pitt, what's his name? Jordan Addison. Oh, he transferred to USC, so they have Jordan Addison at wide receiver as a very very solid number 2, and obviously Justin Jefferson, maybe the best receiver in the NFL as his number 1.
So it sounds like you tell me the Vikings got potential.
Well, I mean, it depends if you like Kevin O'Connor's. His NFL offense. He's a notorious tactician, and a lot of people like the way he schemes up offenses back to his days at Cleveland. So
Who was the last of the 6 quarterbacks to get drafted in the first round?
that would be the oldest quarterback. Outside of Joe Milton, that would be Bo Nix, who went to Sean Payton's Denver Broncos.
Were you surprised? I mean, of all these picks, I think you're saying that the most surprising would have been Atlanta getting Michael Penix Jr. What's the next most surprising?
The next most surprising would probably be Bo Nix going 12. I didn't really have him going that high, but
Same with me.
But Sean Payton was incredibly pleased with himself in his press conferences, and he was very happy to have drafted him. So maybe he knows something that we all don't.
What was the next quarterback drafted? Who was the next quarterback drafted after Bo Nix?
Well, the next quarterback drafted was who everybody thought would be the 7th quarterback drafted, and that is Spencer Rattler from South Carolina by way of Oklahoma.
So he was drafted 7, and people expect him to be the 7th pick. Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah, everybody thought after Bo Nix, Spencer Rattler would be the next quarterback drafted, but I'm not sure if everybody thought 4 rounds would pass before that would happen.
To me, the second most surprising aspect of the draft is that Spencer Rattler from South Carolina did not get drafted until the 5th round to New Orleans Saints. Did the Saints get a steal?
Yeah, I think that's great positional value. I mean, Spencer Rattler, I think a lot of people had 3rd round grades on him. I think a lot of people thought that he might go even higher because of the position and the premium that you have to pay. But that just showed how big of a gap people thought there was between people that they thought could start in the league and guys that they thought, I guess would be, competing for backup spots, because the 5th round that's where you draft a backup quarterback. Kirk Cousins got drafted in the 4th round the same year RG3 got drafted. 5th round is a lot of times where backup quarterbacks go.
Yeah, I was really surprised. Who has more to prove in this draft? Is it Caleb Williams, the number 1 pick, or Spencer Rattler, the 5th round pick?
Caleb Williams has a lot more to prove. He has a lot more expectations. He has a lot more pressure. Derek Carr, I think, has a guaranteed. I can't remember how much money he has guaranteed, but he's going to be the starter. He's not going to be expected to take over the starting spot. Caleb Williams is going to have the microscope on him from day one.
True.
So
Very
I think that's Caleb Williams for sure.
Okay. Let's talk positions. First round pick. There were 6 quarterbacks. I'm just going to focus right now on SEC and Big Ten teams.
Mm-hmm.
Wide receivers, 5. How would you rate some of those receivers? Marvin Harris Jr. was what? He was like the 4th pick. 6th pick was Malik Neighbors.
Mm-hmm.
How would you rate those 2 receivers?
I think, any year they could be you have like 4 different receivers that could have been the first receiver taken in a regular draft. I think that's how deep and talented this receiver class was. Malik Neighbors has the route tree and the speed. Marvin Harrison has the pedigree and the physical stature. And Roma Dunze has the blend of it all.
And he went to.
Well, Marvin Harrison Jr. went to Ohio State. Roma Dunze went to Washington. Malik Neighbors went to LSU.
Okay. Receivers, quarterbacks. What other position was high in the first round pick this year?
Staying on the offensive side of the ball, it was the guys who protect the quarterback. Tackles were flying off the board.
Do you remember in our last video, I said that there would be 8 offensive linemen taken in the first round? I was wrong, JJ. Can you believe it?
Yep, I can believe that.
Okay. There were 9.
Okay.
9 offensive linemen. 9 offensive linemen, 6 quarterbacks, a whole slew of receivers. What was missing from the first round?
On the offensive side of the ball, I would say just running backs for the most part.
True.
True.
And running backs. I interrupted you. About to say something else.
No, I wasn't gonna say anything else.
What about defense? What happened to the defensive players?
Yeah, the first defensive player selected was at 15. Indianapolis Colts selected Latu from UCLA by way of Washington, and he had a neck injury, which forced him to medically retire for a couple years. But he was the most physically dominant pass rusher in the draft, and he fell all the way to 15th because.
Was it the injury?
Well, in part it was the injury, but in part I think just a lot of people had needs for quarterbacks and for I think there was just a unprecedented level of offensive need.
Okay, what do you think about that old saying, offense win games, defense win championships?
Yeah, I mean, I think for the most part, that's no longer the case. I think you need to be balanced. You need to have an offense and a defense. The last team that won the championship was Kansas City Chiefs. The year before that was the Kansas City Chiefs. And
there's a pattern there.
Yeah, their offense has been outpacing their defense a little bit. I think you need to be able to outscore Pat Mahomes and Andy Reid and them. So
JJ has spoken. It's all about the offense.
Well, ask yourself what the defending reigning 2-time Super Bowl champions did. Did they draft offense or did they draft defense? They drafted the fastest player in the history of the NFL Combine.
That's true.
And they traded with the Buffalo Bills up to get him. So that should let you know.
So they got a wide receiver, guy from Texas.
Yeah.
Speed. Offense. Man, I'm puzzled about the lack of concern on defense. But you know what? Offense makes it a little bit more exciting.
Well, once the first defensive player went, a lot of defensive players followed suit. And that opened the floodgates. I think you saw like runs were on. They did runs via position. Like you saw a couple of wide receivers get drafted in chunks. You saw quarterbacks get drafted in chunks. Eventually, you saw corners and safeties drafted in chunks as well. So I think
Well, JJ, we did talk about the players. Go ahead.
Well, they say the reason running backs don't get drafted high anymore is because you can get them without having to pay a premium for running backs in free agency. And what they were drafting now is guys that you can get a cheap contractual value out of. And you can't get, for the most part, you don't get quarterbacks in free agency. You don't get offensive tackles in free agency. Even wide receivers, the best wide receivers aren't available in free agency. So that's what they went after.
And to be honest, quarterbacks play this game a lot longer than running backs do, because the rules have changed so that I think of Ezekiel Elliott.
Yeah, back with the Cowboys.
Back with the Cowboys. Have been around the horn. Running backs have how long a window does a running back have in the NFL, would you say?
I think, a good 3 to 5 year window nowadays. I mean, you'll see a lot of running backs that'll, be super productive for, 3 years that, you don't see their names called after that.
That's what I was going to say. JJ, before we get out of here, the schools, first round pick, Alabama 3, LSU 3, Michigan 1 first round pick, Penn State 2. Who won? Oh, we already said we want to draft the SEC, and I'm going to stick by that. JJ, I'm pretty much done on the draft, but what you got for me?
Yeah, nothing much to add. I think it was a good year to be on either side of the line of scrimmage. A whole lot of defensive linemen and a whole lot of offensive linemen were drafted.
Okay.
I thought it was a pretty good draft for my Bengals. I thought it was a really good draft for the Lions.
Okay. Well,
I think the Eagles might have had the best draft though.
Things are going to get better for me, JJ, when we start talking about college baseball. Can we talk about it? Let's get out of here, JJ. WPS, Woo Pig Sweep, number 2 in the country, guys, in baseball.
Who dey? The roar has been restored.
All right. Peace out.